The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Good morning and welcome to Autism Live. I'm Shannon Penrod and we are webcasting to you live from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders headquarters in Tarzana, California. It's Wednesday and you know how much I love Wednesdays. In just a few minutes we're going to be joined by Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh for Ask Dr. Doreen, and now is a great time for you to interact with us. We will show you a bunch of different ways that you can interact, but I want to remind you that there's only one way to watch us live right now, and that's www.autism-live.com. When you go there, there is a desktop feature that you can type in whatever you would like. You can tell us where you're watching from. You can make suggestions for the show, and more importantly, you can ask questions of experts such as Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and we can answer them in real time. It's a very exciting thing. There is no login. You don't have to have a credit card. You don't give us your personal information. We have already started getting questions this morning, and I'm very excited to start. So without further ado, it's time for Ask Dr. Doreen.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen. Welcome to Ask Dr. Doreen. Our very special guest right now joining us in the studio is Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for being here.
Always a pleasure.
This is honestly my favorite time of the week because
Me too. I love it. It's so
I
much
learn
fun.
so much every time you're here from the questions that you guys ask, and how you answer them is just a really awesome part of my week.
Oh, thank you, Shannon. It's great for me too because just these questions make me think, you know, outside the box a lot of the time.
So appreciate it. And for those of you watching, we've already started getting some questions. We'll continue to take those questions, as many as we can answer in this next hour. I do want to give the little disclaimer at the top of the show here that while Dr. Granpeesheh will be answering your individual questions, we always want to let you know that we would never want to mislead you that we're giving child-specific advice, right? You guys will write something in and tell us a little bit about your child, but we know that that's a disservice to your child to assume that something could be said specifically about your individual child just from that. Your children are wonderful, whole human beings that have so much going on, but we can give general information, correct?
Absolutely. And it's just very difficult to sometimes respond to the questions in detail just because we don't have the child's background or age or pertinent issues. So, but otherwise it's pretty general, but sometimes I think hopefully it'll help some of our listeners.
Really helpful. And I wanted to start with a question that came into us on Facebook. The person writes in and says, my daughter has been scratching and hitting other kids because she can't get the words out. Recently, my gym has rejected her from coming to their child center because of the scratching. I'm waiting to hear back if the behavioral therapist can be there to supervise. If they still say no, is this legally something they can do to deny her access? Do you have any suggestions? And I just have to say, a little disclaimer, that I went through the same thing where our gym refused our son for behavior that he was engaged in that the other kids that were doing, but they knew that he had an autism diagnosis, and we were refused. We came with a behaviorist and they still said, you can't bring him back. It's a heartache for parents.
It is very hard. I don't know the legality of it, but I would assume that the gym is responsible for all of the kids there, and so they're just trying to take measures that would protect the other children. And I would say, you know, you don't really want your child in that environment anyway for a number of different reasons. One is well, obviously, if there are not people there who are trained to be able to help your child or take care of your child, then it's not going to be a positive experience for your child to begin with. And secondly, you know, a lot of times, this is why I always say, Shannon, that our kids need some intervention before they're placed in school or placed in social settings, because, you know, from my perspective, we also don't want our kids to just stand out or to be looked at like, oh, stay away from that kid. I mean, that's not a very positive thing altogether. So really, it goes back to the concept that we've talked about several times, which is, why is your child scratching other kids or hitting other kids? And that's clearly because he or she can't communicate. And I think this parent also said that, because the child can't get the words out.
Exactly.
And really, your behaviorist, you know, ideally, yes, you'd want to have your behaviorist there so that they can help generalize. But your behaviorist is not going to be able to teach the skill that's necessary in that setting. That the skill that's necessary is that, you know, some other form of communication instead of scratching or hitting other kids. And the way to do that, and we've talked about this in the past as well, is just basically you block the behavior. You have to understand that your child's doing this because they're trying to say something.
Yeah.
Okay, they're trying to say, whatever, I want to get on this gym equipment, and or I don't want you here, or whatever it is, and they can't express that. So they do it by hitting or scratching, and when they do that behavior, it's an effective response. So in other words, they'll scratch a child, the child will leave, and then they'll get to play on that equipment. So it's effective. So your child has learned that, hey, scratching other kids or hitting other kids is an effective mode of communication. So you have to now reteach your child that, no, it's not an effective mode of communication, and which would, you know, theoretically that means when your child hits or scratches another child, the other child doesn't leave. Well, we can't make that happen, obviously. Right. So you have to block this response. You can't allow your child to be hitting or scratching other people, and you have to offer your child an easier modality of communication, something that is more appropriate but easier. So for instance, if there's a therapist present with the child, they would perhaps, if your child's nonverbal, they would just have an icon where the child could say, okay, I want to play on this item, or I need, whatever it is. You would have visual graphics that represent the various things that your child might be wanting at that time. And then your child is taught to use those, or verbalizations, obviously, if your child's vocal, to replace the scratching. Because there's too much going on in that environment, this type of thing has to be taught outside of the environment, sort of in a smaller, contained environment where your child gets to practice and then generalized to other children. And that's why it's important to do these things with a therapist, with behaviorists, either in the home, in a school setting, in a clinic setting. But your child needs practice, because this is a behavior that's developed, and the child needs to relearn a new behavior. So it's sort of like practice the behavior. First, make sure your child even knows what that card or icon is for, and then start going back to the gym and implementing it in that new environment.
Thank you so much, because you know, even when I was reading this, I was taken back to that moment when the gym refused my child and the emotion of it.
Oh yeah.
And I remember asking the same question, can they legally do that?
Yeah.
But what you just brought home to me was, well, that's a question that you can ask. The better question is, how can I help my child?
Yeah.
And is this the right place for my child to be? And when somebody is saying that they don't want your child, chances are, not that we in any way give up on our children, but that isn't the best place in the moment for our kids.
Yeah, and you know what you said, Shannon, is so important as well. We become so defensive when anything is about our kids.
Yes.
Anything at all, you know. My 17-year-old last night was at UCLA and got a ticket in the parking, and I'm already like, I can't believe UCLA parking would give you a ticket, you have a permit, all this, you know. We immediately protect our kids, and we become so at every level, right? And we think, okay, they have the right, and so on. But the truth is, the people at the gym or the people at a school or wherever it is, it's not like they are just mean people. You know, they're trying to protect the other kids, and they're not trained. They don't know how to manage these types of things. They don't have any idea what to do with this. And they're probably hearing other parents who are just as protective about their own kids coming and complaining. So I think these opportunities, and it's of course so hard for moms and dads who have kids on the spectrum, because everybody's so fast to judge our kids in some way or another. But I think it's an important opportunity for us to learn and just say, okay, I'm getting defensive about this. Let's just look at the reality of things, and I need to work with my child outside of this environment and then get him into a gym. And it's just like, you know, it really isn't a positive experience for your child either. It's like throwing any other child, let's say a typically developing child, into a high-level math class where our child's always going to fail. So why not tutor the child first and then introduce him to the skill that's hard?
We're actually going to talk about math later, because we had some questions about math. But we had a question that came in last week that I promised we would answer today. Why do so many of our children on the spectrum suffer from seizures? Our son developed seizures when he was older, and no one can tell us why.
Right, and I can't tell you why either. There is a higher correlation of seizure disorder with autism than probably any other childhood disorder, but the reasons are generally different reasons. The focal point of the seizures, sometimes it's not even possible to identify. They're generalized seizures, but from my personal experience, the majority of the kids that I've had who've had seizures is focused in the temporal lobes, and so any activity in the temporal lobes tends to also make our kids a little bit more impatient, a little bit more aggressive. That's just how the temporal lobes are. And can't tell you, honestly. I will say that you know, as a whole, first of all, you need to know it's not just autism, but we don't know enough about seizure activity. The science hasn't developed that far to be able to say exactly what's causing what. But if you have seen a neurologist, if you've done various tests, scans, EEG for sure, and perhaps even a CAT scan or a PET scan, or even an MRI, you will, you know, be sure that there's no physical problems that are happening. So it's basically maybe a chemical problem or a biochemical issue. And I guess prior to trying seizure medications or anticonvulsants, a lot of the parents will do various diets that help seizures, and they are successful. Sometimes they're successful and sometimes they're not. And, you know, if you see your neurologist, they will suggest the various diets to you as well.
Okay, awesome. Great advice. And one more question that came in last week that we didn't get to was, how do you test for enzyme deficiencies?
There are tests, and depending on where you are, you know, I always recommend the physicians who were originally part of the Autism Research Institute, or they used to be called DAN doctors, and now I think they're called MAPS. A lot of those physicians will very easily do those tests for you. So I would suggest that you can look online, and I would imagine, I'm not even sure if they have a roster right now, but I know all of the instructors at MAPS, like Dr. Rosignol and all the instructors, Dr. Usman, depending on where you are, they're pretty much spread all through the country. All of those guys would be able to easily do these tests. And I believe you can actually, I'm not sure if it's a urine test or a blood test, but you can certainly get deficiencies looked at.
And we'll put the link to the MAPS site up on our Facebook. So we'll
and they are really all over the country, so it shouldn't be too hard for you to get to see one of them.
You shouldn't have to travel too far. Okay, I think it's a great time for us to take a break. We're going to come back with a bunch more questions after these messages. Stick with us.
Every child with autism deserves a bright future.
Without further clarification, the Affordable Care Act could actually result in less benefits for individuals with autism spectrum disorders.
We urge Catherine Sebelius to clarify the Affordable Health Care Act.
She can make one change, one little minor change, to make applied behavioral analysis be part of the health care plan.
By signing this petition, you are protecting the health care benefits of individuals with autism spectrum disorders.
We need to make sure
that we are heard
and seen.
Sign the petition at autism-live.com.
Here's how you can show your infinite support.
create your own infinity ribbon. What you're going to do is take a ribbon that's been cut about 8 inches long, and you're going to grab one end and then twist it, and then take the two ends and join them together, and then tape it together. And then I'm going to flip it around and take another piece of tape, and what I have is double-sided sticky tape. Squeeze down. You have your very own infinity ribbon.
With ABA,
The possibilities are infinite.
With ABA,
The possibilities are infinite.
with ABA, the possibilities are infinite.
With ABA,
The possibilities are infinite.
With ABA,
the possibilities are infinite.
With ABA,
The possibilities are infinite. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, a true visionary in the field of autism.
Thank you very much.
So thrilled to have you here. We have a question that just came in on our live feature. Hi, Dr. Doreen. How do you teach a child to defend themselves without becoming aggressive? I'm all ears on your answer to this.
Yeah, well, this is one of those things that's, I mean, we teach this in our program, but we teach it sort of a little bit later in the program because it's one of those social rules that are very hard for our kids to be able to identify. I mean, we actually teach our kids to be more assertive in certain environments, and it is difficult because if you teach a child very early on how to defend themselves, what you're doing is let's break that down together. Let's do a little task analysis. So in order to defend yourself, the first thing you have to do is identify what the scenario is in which you should defend yourself. In other words, am I actually being attacked in some way? Am I being mocked in some way? Am I being bullied in some way? And see, all of those things are very, very abstract concepts. So even if we just focus on bullying, like how do you teach a child to identify someone that would be classified as a bully, let's say, right? It's very difficult. It's very different because, I mean, you have bullies that are the classic sort of bully that you see on TV or whatever, but then you could also have a child whose best friend is in a very subtle way bullying them and you know, not treating them well. So these are very advanced concepts that you can't really teach to the child when they're very young or when they haven't entered, when they don't have some other prerequisite skills in place already. This kind of goes hand in hand, Shannon, with all the area where we teach our kids to identify other people's facial expressions, understand intentions. That's like, you know, your child has to have had some practice with the theory of mind programming and all the perspective taking, because how do you know someone else is intending to be mean if you can't see their perspective? See, it's all kind of related to more basic things that have to be in place. So that's why if your child is not at that area, you know, hasn't reached that yet, you really need to have an aide or a shadow or someone watching over your child so they identify the scenarios. Now, if that's just stage one. It's like identifying the scenario. Once you've identified, or so either you have someone else just pointing out to your child like he shouldn't have said that to you, or that was a mean thing to say. So, or your child can identify those things themselves. They've passed that stage. Then the next stage is what's an appropriate response. And so the appropriate response is stuff that you can practice with your child, obviously. And you know, let's face it, sometimes defending yourself is aggressive, but it's appropriate in a social norm if it's in defense of yourself, right? So it keeps going back to that original thing, which is, hey, it is appropriate for my child to push someone if that person is beating them up. But it's not appropriate for my child to push someone if that someone is passively standing there. You know what I mean?
And different even because you mentioned intention, because sometimes a child can push another child because
accidentally, for instance. That's right. I mean, I remember I had a child who was really, really upset because somebody had knocked down his backpack, and he thought it was an intentional act. So really teaching our kids to defend themselves it's not so much about teaching them the ways to defend themselves, so it's much more about learning scenarios that require defending yourself. That's the harder part. Because once you've learned that sort of stuff, then you will only use those behaviors when it's appropriate. Now, of course, other factors, like if our child doesn't have enough language, how is he going to defend himself? Because then, you know, he has the propensity to become more physical and more aggressive. So obviously, if the child has language, that helps. That should be a prerequisite skill. So what do we do for our kids that don't have language? If a teacher is watching them or if an aide is watching them and a situation happens, then all you can really expect of your child at that time is to go to the teacher and perhaps give a card or give an icon or something, so that our child starts to get into the habit of identifying when he or she is being hurt and letting someone know. I mean, that's like the minimum thing you want to teach. And then at the very high end of let's say development or the spectrum or learning, right, once you've learned a bunch of skills, then it's identifying all different scenarios that you're being aggressed against or bullied or made fun of or whatever it is, and then identifying multiple appropriate behaviors that could be done in those situations and then doing them. But you know, and then again, the age of the child. So if it's a younger child, you want to teach the child to go to the teacher. If it's an older child, that's not even a good thing, because that'll provoke more bullying, you know. So there's too much in here that has to be taught. So really what I'm saying is, you know, there's a series of, and if you're interested again on skills, we have this entire series of, I think it's in the social curriculum, so it's in the social domain area, and it's listed under, I think it's listed under assertiveness training, and so it's teaching the child how to be assertive without being aggressive. And again, it's like any other behavior. If you teach a behavior, let's say, you know, behaviors can be maladaptive or adaptive, the same exact behavior. So as I gave the example of pushing someone, it can be maladaptive or it can be adaptive. Let's say screaming. It could be maladaptive if you're just screaming in a classroom or whenever you feel like it. It's quite adaptive if you're screaming when you see a fire. You know? So the same behavior, it has to do with the appropriateness of the environment and when it occurs. Those types of things you really have to teach one at a time to the child.
Wow. Very exciting, though.
Right?
It is a lot, but it's exciting to think that there is a roadmap for it.
There's definitely a roadmap. It takes a while. These are harder concepts, so you wouldn't even be really working on these concepts unless the child's over 5 or 6. Child has to have some prerequisite, you know, basic skills, some language ability, that sort of thing. And if they don't, then really you're depending on the adults around the child to help protect them. And I have to also say on that, Shannon, that I feel one of the positive things that I'm seeing happen just over time, you know, there was this, and it's improved. It isn't completely better, but it's improved quite a bit. And I think it just has to do with, one is there's so many kids being diagnosed now that people are, I guess, more familiar with it. And the second thing is that there's so many different movements out there about bullying and what happens to kids in high schools and all this sort of stuff, that I think as a whole children have become more empathetic to our kids. I mean, I see this in my kids' schools, and they have much more of a, although they're not comfortable yet, I wouldn't say other kids are fully comfortable with our kids yet, but they're more empathetic, that's for sure. You know, they're not, there's less bullying and less of that sort of thing going on than there were a few years ago.
Which is amazing to think, because there's still work that needs to be done, but encouraging to see that needle move a little bit.
And I would, you know, one of the things I'd be very passionate about is training typically developing kids so that they understand more about this.
Well, it really is a part of the problem. You know, we can spend a whole lot of time front-loading our children to be able to deal with all these different situations, but unfortunately in some cases courses, they're going to come up against kids who didn't have any training, neurotypical kids, about how to behave appropriately. That's always going to be the case.
Exactly.
Frustrating. But, you know, I think you're exactly right with these bullying programs. More and more information is out there. Hopefully, it continues to help.
This is really a good, actually, I keep saying this, but there's just such a little, you know, I need 5 lives to do all the things I want to do. But we have so many of our little guys here that are now like 7, 8, you know, like your son. These guys are so great at the age they are, and they would be fabulous for going to elementary schools and just talking about the experience and so on.
And I think that they would enjoy it. It is an interesting thing. I will say that because Gemma's 9 now, and I'm noticing the difference in the kids in this age range. That they, and I certainly have been talking to different people about it, that they're in this phase where everybody has to act aloof to be cool. So they're not bothered by anything. They're not, you know, they're above it all. And I don't want to teach him that.
No, and you know what?
But he has to be able to cope with their aloofness.
Right, but you know what? Even amongst his friends, there will be those kids who are more sensitive, not as aloof, much more sort of into being a good human.
Yes.
And those are the kids you're going to find. He's going to find.
Yes.
He's going to find kids who are similar to him. He's, you know, he's going to find kids that are going to be just more empathetic, more sensitive, more caring. And like I've said many times, our kids, as they recover, are beautiful human beings. And they don't have anything, they have very, very little bad, and they don't. They're just lovely kids. You know, they're pure.
And that whole thing of pretending. That when you know that they're feeling something that they're not feeling. Our kids don't have.
Yeah, or just being tough. Well, I mean, being tough. You know, kids 9, 10, and so on. Acting tough is just putting up a wall because you have so many defenses. And our kids don't have those defenses because we've been all over them for 4 years or something by that point. So they're just very open to learning and open to the environment, and they're trusting. They're much more trusting of other people. And so that's kind of, you know, he will find friends that are like him. Like
he has. He does have a couple of friends that are not. It's interesting, though, that I see them all being characterized as kids who are a little bit not as mature as the other ones. And I'm thinking, no, really, I think they're bypassing this phase that you're calling maturity that's really not a fun phase, quite honestly.
It's not maturity. It is confusion, if you ask me. I think it's the phase that a lot of kids go through where they are afraid of other people knowing truly who they are. So they fake. They're pretty, like, they don't really want anyone to get too close because they have to have this persona of being really tough, or I don't know what. And
everything's okay.
And everything's okay, and that kind of stuff, and who cares, and whatever, and all that, just because they have a hard time letting anyone in. And that's just because they're not comfortable with themselves, so they don't think other people would praise them for who they really are.
And those children, I find, don't know how to language how they're feeling. My child will say, and sometimes he'll language it for me or somebody else, he'll say, well, I think you're feeling frustrated right now. He does. And I go, yes, that's exactly what Mommy is feeling. Thank you for putting that in words for me. You know, and I think sometimes other children don't necessarily appreciate that, but
or if they do know it, they haven't been allowed to express it.
And I feel bad for them about that.
Well, I mean, you know, this is different parenting styles. I mean, you know, a lot of our parents here tell me that when they go through this whole thing, it changes not only their lives and their child's life, but future siblings, you know, because your whole experience changes and you don't let anything go anymore. Like, you see your child angry for a week, you'll sit down and have a conversation and figure out why.
Exactly.
In typical families, people don't really give it the time. They're not as focused on the individual details of their kids. So, you know, I mean, that's one of the benefits that I think a lot of our parents don't realize. It's like we're all trained to be really good behavior analysts, psychologists, like not let anything go. And as a result of that, our kids learn to share and talk and work through their issues much better.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And as you said, it is incredible parent training. You know, that was the first thing that somebody said to me when they sent me to the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. You're going to get the best parent training you can find anywhere in the world. And I certainly found that to be the truth. Okay, we got a bunch of questions that have come in. Okay. Math questions, which I'm going to get to. Hi, Dr. Doreen. Do kids who get really better using ABA have a different style of learning than those who do get ABA but not as much progress? By style, I mean factors such as learning at a faster pace, understanding concepts quickly, etc. Thank you so much.
You know, I have rarely, so all of our kids respond in different ways, obviously. There are some kids that will go through these programs like just, you know, it's just their language, it is. And other kids will have problems, but the kids who have a few problems, it has more to do with their sensory needs, I find, than just their ability or their style of learning. I would say this is the style of learning across all human beings. ABA, the original name for applied behavior analysis was behavior modification, and behavior modification fell under, and still falls under an area of psychology called learning psychology. So it is the #1 way that human beings learn. Operant conditioning, that's just a fact. So it's not about your child's learning style. If I had to guess, I would say it's about one or the other, one thing or another. And my first, I guess, I would lean towards first saying it's the ABA program. So the program, there's many components that have to be ideal in the program, and we'll talk about that. And the second thing it could be is possibly your child's sensory abilities, and I'll talk about that real quickly because that's easier. Sensory, what I mean is some kids will learn better if something is provided to them visually, that's just because they have a hard time with differentiating sounds, ground discrimination of sounds, or hearing with sounds at the same pace with both ears. Other kids will have a harder time with visual material just because their visual perception has problems, binocularity, they're not focused, whatever it is. But, and other kids will have other sensory issues like tactile proprioceptive issues that are just disturbing. They kind of keep them on an anxious level because their skin feels like it's crawling or something like that. So the sensory stuff is very important to take care of because that really does, not only does it help your child be able to focus better, but it also helps to make your child just calmer and more attentive, and then you know that the material being presented is being presented in a way that your child can receive. It's like, I'm not going to have a child learn reading when there's problems with their vision. It's like, you know, how much can I actually read if I don't have my glasses on? It's the same thing. So sensory input is extremely important to evaluate. Now, going back to the ABA program, first of all, the program has to be very fluid. First of all, let's back up and say the program has to be appropriate. So one of the components is the modality, which means you've taken into account the sensory needs of the child. And so you're using materials and so on. I mean, I've changed materials for a child where I've like presented some stimulus that's this big, and it's like given to or put in front of the child. The child won't respond at all. If the stimulus is this big and it's presented this way, the child's responding every single trial. So you have to play with that. Second thing is the intensity. I have so many parents telling me that ABA just didn't really work for my child. And then I'll ask them more about it, and I'll find out that people have the perception that ABA is like speech therapy, so you should be doing maybe 2 hours a week of ABA. And I've said before, don't even waste your time with that because it's not the same thing. This is about intensive teaching, because there's so many concepts that you have to catch your child up to. So that has probably the most to do with the speed of acquisition and how fast your child's learning is, how many hours is your child getting. And you know, the traditional concept is it has to be, if your child's over 3, then you're looking at, and is in that early intensive phase, you're looking at somewhere between 30 to 40 hours a week of therapy. So people find that hard to believe, but that's the dosage that works.
Yeah.
And then there's all these other factors, like, is your child being reinforced adequately? In fact, does he even have reinforcers that are meaningful? Is there enough motivation? Are the programs being taught and presented in a gradual hierarchy so that your child's not being given things that are too complex without the prerequisite skills being taught first? Is there a balance of fairness in terms of demand and reward for the child? That's like a huge thing. Sometimes there's way too much reward, not enough demand, the child gets bored. Sometimes there's too much demand, not enough reward, and the child is aggressive, becomes aggressive because they're helpless, they can't win. There's all these factors. So the more important thing is your ABA program. Spend some time really evaluating that. I think if you go on our website, there's one of the links goes to something we wrote a long time ago about how to evaluate your ABA provider.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of stuff about that. So that is a very key component, I think.
And that's very helpful because for a lot of us, we don't know what to compare it to.
Right.
And people do write in and ask all the time, how do I know if my ABA provider is good? So that's a really helpful document. And finding that mix, as you were saying, I didn't know when we were having our early intervention from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, I didn't know how lucky I was. I didn't know how good I had it.
Kind of you.
And then I would hear other parents in my same community with children at the same school as my son talking about their therapy. And there was one example that really brought it home for me, that somebody was saying, oh, we had a really rough day of therapy yesterday. My son hit the therapist, and so the therapist had to leave for the day and therapy was over. And I was appalled. I said, the therapist left because your child aggressed?
Right.
Because that would never have happened.
No, of course not. Our therapists, there's no way they would leave. That's part of what they're trained to do.
Exactly. And that what the child learned in that moment, to my way of thinking, was, hey, if I don't want to do therapy today, I will hit the therapist. I found something that works.
That's right.
And for people who would say, oh, they only come and play with my child, they never do anything else but play, and people who say they only come and drill, and
I know.
It was shocking to me.
Yeah, well, there has to be a really good balance. I mean, we spend so much time on our therapists and on our supervisors. It's funny because somebody was asking me last night about the regulations here and whether or not I feel that it would be appropriate to allow bachelor's level people to supervise cases. And I said, honestly, I know that a lot of providers want that, but I don't, because you have the life of a child in your hands, and you have to have a certain level of training. And when I say that, I also have, we hire board certified people in for supervision, and we're expanding pretty fast, so we're hiring a lot of BCBAs. And they have to go through a bunch of training here, which is like 3 to 6 months of training, depending on how good they are when they come in. And some of the BCBAs who come in are quite offended by the fact that they have to go through our training, otherwise they can't work here. And they have a lot of oversight in their first year overall, because these are the things that are important. It's like taking into consideration all of the factors having to do with the child, but then also being able to be flexible in your programming, modify things, because every child's different.
Yeah.
And every family is different. Like, you can't go into a family that has, 4 kids, 2 of them with problems, and just make a whole bunch of strict demands, because, hey, the family's falling apart. Let's help as much as we can here within our constraints. So some of these things really just has to do with the provider, and it's hard. It's very hard.
It is hard, but I appreciate how you guys do it and how you take into consideration the individual family and the individual child and our time. That the fact that and our goals for our individual children, and that you have our child's life in your hands, and that we don't get this time over again.
Right.
And that's the thing that I want to remind parents: you don't get this time. You don't get to do do-overs. And so many parents that I've met that have eventually switched to card and said, "I wish I had that year back."
Year ago. Yeah, I know. Yeah, that's okay though. I mean, we're very fortunate in that we are now growing fast enough to be able to clear our waiting lists faster. I mean, we're not quite there yet, and each of the offices have a number of kids waiting, which really always disturbs me. But we're able to take on more of the kids, and so they don't have to wait to transfer in. And you know, CARD is not by any means the only place that has this type of thing going on. It really has to do with the maturity of the supervisor, I think, the overall understanding. I find a lot of my supervisors are really much better once they have their own kids. They become a little bit more open-minded about it. But in general, I think you should probably, as a parent who's out there and not quite clear about how things are going, you should maybe shop around a little bit and see if your child progresses faster with another provider. And again, the most important thing is the actual hours, I would say, the dosage. It's like I always say, if a physician gives you a medication and says 25 milligrams, you're not going to expect an effect if you do 5 milligrams.
Right.
It's the same thing here.
Absolutely. Great time for us to take a break. We're going to come back with more questions. You can keep them coming in. And like I said, we'll be back after this break with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Hi, I'm Bryce Myler, and I'm the Contracts Director for the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. I've been here for about 5 years. CARD has several employees with many years of insurance experience, dealing with insurance, dealing with pre-authorizations, dealing with discovering whether there's coverage or not. So we have more experience than any ABA provider that I've ever come across. So for a prospective client, somebody that may be interested in, you know, ABA therapy and what CARD has to offer, we have a special 800 number, and you call that number. They will talk to you about what we have to offer, how ABA works. He'll ask you for the front and back of your ID card, and then we check to see if you do or do not have coverage. If you have coverage for ABA therapy, we try to do whatever we can to set it up where we can bill for you and you don't have to fight with the insurance company every month to get your claims paid. For California residents, we recently did a series of insurance trainings all over the state, and you can click on the link below to watch pretty much the full presentation. It has a lot of information, how you can get your insurance company to comply with what they're supposed to do, understanding the networks, and many other valuable pieces of information.
Question. Welcome back to Ask Dr. Doreen. We're here with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, who is truly an expert in the field of autism and has been working in this field for multiple decades. I hate to say how long, because nobody would believe it. But we have a question about medication that we'll ask you, and you can see if you'd like to answer it. Hi, Dr. Doreen. What are your thoughts with Zoloft to help with anxiety? Plus, our 6-year-old son takes clonidine to help him to get to a relaxing point to fall asleep, but he still wakes up on and off throughout the night. What are your thoughts? Thank you.
I'm not really supposed to be giving you medical advice here because I'm not a physician, but I will tell you my personal feelings about both of those medications. Clonidine, in general, I would suggest that you try to get your child off of clonidine if you can. I don't know if you've tried melatonin for sleep. If you have, understood. I mean, sometimes it just nothing works with our kids other than something as strong as clonidine. But there is a particular brand of melatonin that I like, that I use because I travel a lot, and it really works for me, and it's called Tranquil Sleep, and you can order it from Amazon. And it's a combination of melatonin with tryptophan and theanine, and it's really good. It's much, much more effective, and it's a chewable, and it tastes really good, so our kids love it. And for kids, it's usually just 1 tablet. Chewable. For adults, it's 2. But so that's what I would suggest for the sleep. And that's what I do. But for the Zoloft, Zoloft is one of the serotonin reuptake inhibitors, so an SSRI, and there's a whole body of them, right? There's many, many varieties like Prozac and Luvox and Paxil and so on. And now there's even a new group which is not just this SSRIs, which is selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, but there are also SNRIs, which are the serotonin and norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. And what they're doing is they inhibit reuptake. So really what that means is your neurotransmitter, like let's say serotonin, which is traveling from one nerve to another nerve. So this nerve produces serotonin, the other nerve is supposed to take it and keep going, and that's how your neurotransmitters travel. And the synapse, the area in between the two nerves, is, at some point full of serotonin before this one takes it up. Now, as the new nerve is receiving this information, the one that just produced it has this other cell called a reuptake cell, and it just sucks the excess amount back into it. So the effect of that's normal human functioning. And the effect of it is that if serotonin stays in the synapse too long, the nerve that just produced it will take it back, basically. These reuptake inhibitors, they prevent that. So the serotonin sits there in the nerve synapse longer so that the next nerve cell can just take it and go with it. So it allows you to more efficiently use your own neurotransmitters. So it's kind of a misnomer to say it increases your serotonin levels. It doesn't. It just reduces the blocking of serotonin. So as an effect, you have higher. Serotonin is the medication that controls anxiety, obviously, and depression and all those types of things. Norepinephrine is the one that is more related to other states of emotion, affect, higher level affect. But having said that, do I feel that these medications are good? Personally, I do. I've seen a tremendous amount of change with my kids. When you have, and I am a strong, strong believer that a lot of our kids have anxiety, and at all levels. Like, I think that when they're very little, or if they are even very little. I mean, I always talk to the parents and I say, just imagine how you would feel if you had the following things going on with you. You weren't sleeping. Just really, as I go through this list, put yourself in that state. Yeah. You're not sleeping. A lot of things that you eat give you discomfort. That's the case with a lot of our kids. You're not understanding what's going on around you, so it's very difficult for you to communicate with people because there's like gibberish around you. You don't get their language. You're not able to express what you want except for certain ways, like screaming and crying and tantruming or whatever. You are in a heightened response state to stimuli. It's kind of like when you're jet lagged, I guess, or if you've had 20 cups of coffee or something, and like lights bother you. Sort of, people with migraines express this whole feeling as well. Lights disturb you, sounds come in too loud, or it's all this stuff. So you have sensory overload, you're exhausted because you're not sleeping, you have some medical issues, GI perhaps or other. I mean, just GI itself, for our kids who have GI problems, I mean, just imagine if you had diarrhea 5 times a day. How would you feel, you know? So given all of that, all of these actually make people feel anxious. That's just a fact. Okay.
All these things you're describing, it sounds like an autism parent going to an IEP meeting.
Oh, absolutely.
And hey, we experience all that going to an IEP meeting. So we can relate.
And you have anxiety. That's the thing. And now
and it's gibberish. We don't understand. We don't feel like we have a...
And you have no control. Right. It's all that same thing. Right. But the thing is, that's a moment of anxiety, and it's periodic and it's over, right?
Yeah.
And do you know how tired you feel the day after that, or that afternoon or evening? Right. So anxiety actually burns up a lot of glucose, so you're exhausted after that. Our kids have a chronic level of that stuff going on, right? Because they're in this world of their own. So they develop habits to help them control their environment. And these habits could be anything from carrying around a favorite blanket or a toy all the time, always wanting to be close to mom or dad or someone they trust, lining up objects or doing ritualistic, repetitive behaviors, because those are the compulsions that make us feel more in control of things. You know, that our kids lose it when their activities are suddenly changed or their schedule is changed. Or that's anxiety. So how do you treat anxiety? And you know, by the way, I've said this before just so for people to know, when we refer to obsessive compulsive behavior, which we also in behavioral terms, we call it self-stimulatory or stereotypic ritualistic behavior in autism. But obsessive compulsive disorder is a subclassification of anxiety disorders. It's one of the anxiety disorders. And so it comes from anxiety. Now, the treatment for anxiety, a lot of literature shows that the best possible outcome for anxiety is a combined treatment of cognitive, behavioral, and medication. So cognitive behavioral on its own works. Medication on its own works. The best is the combination. And the medications are generally the SSRIs. So depending on the age of your child, when you see your physician and they suggest, was it Zoloft, it will be a lower dosage, so because your child's body weight is lower. And then it might be effective at that dose. However, one of the things you need to know about the SSRIs is that people have different responses to these medications. So if your child doesn't respond to Zoloft, which you'll know in about 3 weeks, all of these SSRIs take approximately 3 weeks to show an effect. If he or she doesn't respond, then you should try the other ones. Like you need to go through the other types like Paxil, Prozac, whatever they are, just because all of a sudden one will work very, very well, and one won't. And that's just because of the chemical shape of the reuptake cells that are being controlled. That's all it is. So yes, you know, as I said, I have talked to a lot of parents who've benefited from SSRIs. It just kind of makes our kids a little bit less on edge, a little bit less afraid, a little bit braver, a little bit calmer. It helps a lot with the teaching.
Okay, great. Yeah. Now, I promised we would talk about a math question that came in yesterday.
Sure.
And we talked about it a little bit yesterday, but we all agreed that we wanted your take on it. There's really two parts to the question, because a parent had written in and said that their child has good math skills and is very good at being able to do math questions for homework, but when it comes to a word problem, that there seems to be difficulty with the comprehension, sorting out and taking the problem. If the mom goes through and sorts out the problem, they can do the math component of it, but the comprehension part of it. And then further, it morphed into a conversation about having to do the steps with math and how frustrating that is for a lot of our kids, because they want to trot ahead and they're in a classroom where they're asking to see the steps. So we wanted to get your take on teaching math to our kids, both from the comprehension standpoint, that's a component that needs to be used in math, and how we might work on comprehension, and then the frustration of doing the steps.
Right. So I guess this is no different than any other child, I would say. And so these are really three components. One is the comprehension of the, what are they, math equations or something. And then one is the actual taking the steps, which the steps are pre-identified. I mean, you can, within each type of thing, there's always the same series of steps. So you can pretty much help the child by writing out sort of a framework of these are the steps. And with math, by the way, we use a lot of visual, just written material, diagrams and so on, for the child to be able to comprehend the stuff. So I would suggest you definitely do write out the steps. So every time you have a math question, these are the things you have to do. And the first thing you have to do is be able to understand the math question and turn it into a basic equation, obviously. So when you read a math question that's, what are they called? Like,
the word problems.
Word problems.
Jim is walking 3 miles in this direction while Betsy is walking 14 in the other direction.
So what we do generally, so I think if a child is good at the equation part of it, this is more about the comprehension of the actual word problem. So have your child draw it out. Just have them draw it out and just say, okay, this is Jim, and he's walking, okay? And he's either walking this way or this way, but draw a line showing where he's walking. And then how long is he walking? Okay, 3 miles. Immediately, if the child, and the third component that I wanted to say is the core stuff. The core stuff. When I was teaching my kids math, I realized that there are some little things that you can teach your kids that really, really help forever. Obviously, our kids have to be extremely fluid with and flexible and really good at like math, you know, multiplication, addition, and all that sort of stuff. So we want to make sure they're really good at that. the other thing that really helps them is the units of measurement help them identify what it is they're looking for. So when you write miles, and if your child has memorized that these are all units of measurement of distance, whether it's kilometers or miles or whatever it is,
inches, yeah.
Inches and shorter, and you actually physically in life show them these units of measurement, that helps comprehension of word problems so much more. So Jim is walking 3 miles, your child will immediately know this is distance.
Okay.
And so all you have to do is draw a line and you write 3 miles. Or if it's like, you know, so-and-so went and bought 6 oranges, well then have your child just draw them. Okay, 6 oranges, this is quantity.
Right.
And so and then if they draw it out, it's very easy underneath it to write the equation.
Yeah.
You know, so if he bought 3 and he gave away 2, so just draw a person, he's giving away these 2 to another person. So, and giving away is the symbol minus.
Right.
Certain words actually are exact equivalents to equation things.
Right.
So, you know, he had a quantity of 5, he gave away minus sign, 2 of them.
Right.
So what is that? And that equals, you know, whatever it is. So make it as visual as possible. One of the things with both my son and my youngest daughter, and my oldest daughter, actually, when we were doing math initially together when they were younger, I would get so frustrated, especially with my son, because kids have the tendency to not use any paper. Like they'll have one screen and they want to write it all on the margin and they want to write it tiny.
Right.
And I can't do math if that's the case. I need almost the full page for any equation. Like I really do. And so I will just pull out scrap paper and I'm like, no, write it big, write all the things you understand from it, and let's figure out the stuff you're missing from it, and let's make it visual. And I will tell you, like, just doing that, I remember my oldest daughter, when she was just in starting middle school, so 6th grade. I remember she was starting, I think, with pre-algebra or something. And pre-algebra, obviously, is all equations. So we sat together, and she was just, like, hated it. She was like, I hate math. I can't stand math. This is horrible. I'm never going to get math, blah, blah, blah. And we did all this stuff. And I have to tell you, she is, like, so superior in math. She takes, you know, she's, like, by far past anything I would ever understand. She's done like advanced placement calculus. You know, she's crazy now, of course, having finished high school. But I mean, I think she took the AP exam in math because she's so strong in math now. And it was simply just being able to not fear it and like, you know, draw it so that you can understand exactly what it's saying to you. It's the same concept as what we do with language with our kids who don't understand. We use like the concepts of thought, and we use these comic strips that we draw out the comic strips. So-and-so said this, the other person felt this, and all we really do is we have one dialogue in the head, which is what they think, one in the heart, which is how they feel, you know?
Right.
And so you just make it visual, and it'll make it easier for the child.
Okay. And reinforcing when they also do the steps, too.
Oh, there's no question. Listing the steps, so you always draw it out first, draw the equation, solve the equation, you know, whatever, and as you get more complex, your steps will increase.
Yeah.
But and then rewarding the child for gradual approximations.
And I love the fact that you say, well, of course. But for us as parents, we go, right, I got to remember, how do I make that right?
Right. But it's like, you know, like, so let's just forget that it's math for a minute.
Yeah.
Like, let's just say brushing your teeth.
Yeah.
Like, one of the things that I do for for my own kids, I did this, right? So you want them to brush their teeth and get ready in the morning. So what's the easiest way? Do you really want to stand there and tell them step by step every morning? No. I took a picture of my child doing every step. And I put the picture in a row, and then I stood there and I said, what do you have to do first? What's next? What's next? And then I didn't have to stand there anymore.
Yeah.
So what are you doing with taking pictures and putting them in a row? You're writing out the steps.
Yeah.
So that's all it is, you know, and then after a while they just think it's really cute, and you take the pictures away and they know what they're doing.
It's amazing. This is why I say this is the best parent training that there is available.
Yeah.
Because quite honestly, does not occur to me.
Yeah, I mean, I think, and from our end, it's just we don't think of it any other way, because that's how we've lived our whole lives, is break things down into small chunks, make sure they're successful. That's a big thing I find with kids with math. Like, I am very thankful somehow my kids all get math, but they're actually, I think even my son now, who's in 9th grade, is pretty much like doing math that's hard for me to comprehend sometimes. They go in advanced math very fast. But I have to say, the biggest part I found is that in general they fear math to begin with, and they think it's a very hard subject, and it's not. I think with math you have to take the fear out of it for kids.
With my kid, and I'm sorry, I always take it back to my kid, but it's what I know. He doesn't fear math. He just is convinced that he has a better, faster way to do it in his head, and he doesn't want to do the steps. But he will. I think the key for me that I learned here is that I just have to make that part more reinforcing to him, and I might have to bring something from outside to make it more reinforcing. If I make it a song, that's reinforcing. That's what we had to do with spelling. If I make something else to go with it, he just wants to do it in his head.
Do you know what you should do? But does he get it correct in his head?
Sometimes. Now that we're getting into multiple numbers and more complicated math,
it's getting harder.
He will get it. Yeah, it's getting harder for him. Okay. And so he does have to do the steps.
Right. So why don't you just talk to his teacher and tell his teacher to require that he shows his work.
Oh, she has been on him. He just doesn't want to, and he'll go, I don't want to.
But does he know the steps? Does he know exactly what the steps are?
He does know the steps, but to him, that's like crazy. Why can't I just do it in my head?
Right.
You know,
because he's probably sharper, and he's at the phase of figuring out the next stage.
Yes.
But just count up the steps and reward him for additional steps. Yeah, I mean, that's just break it down and reward them.
I'm working on it. And we have more questions that we'll get to. I promise we will get to them next week, but we are out of time, they tell us. Right. But I thank you so much.
My
so
pleasure.
Exciting always to have you
always
here.
Fun. Thank you.
Thank you guys for writing in with your questions. Do keep them coming in. And we're going to say goodbye to Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, but we are going to take a break and look at the A word. When we come back, we'll be joined by Nancy Alspaugh-Jackson for Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and our guest today is going to be Becky Estepp, so we're very excited about that. Stick with us.
We skipped a few in the middle, didn't we, love? Jack Riley likes to watch videos about the ABCs, or the ABBCs, as he likes to say. He kept throwing a fit and misbehaving when he wasn't getting what he wanted. We finally decided it was time to turn off the computer. And of course we did that without warning him.
He threw one of the biggest tantrums I've ever seen from him, because he's used to getting his way now, because now that he can say it, we're supposed to reward him. But now he's testing us.
While we are 100% ABA advocates and we believe it is working on our son, there is a little fallout in reinforcing these requests that he doesn't quite understand now, that he doesn't get everything he wants.
Bye-bye! This is completely typical. When requesting isn't something that happens naturally with your child, you want to create as many opportunities to practice the skill. So you reinforce each time they request, because it will increase the frequency they demand. Once the requests are at a rate you want, then you should begin to fade the frequency of reinforcement and teach new advanced skills, such as having the child wait for a desired item or let them know that they must choose something else. These are all life skills. Not every desire will be met, but you are more likely to get what you want if you communicate your wants appropriately.
You want some applesauce, buddy?
Yeah, why don't we put the car over here,
yeah, let's take the car. We're just going to take a break. Take a break. Take a break. Do you want this? Do you want the car?
Do you want more car?
Settle down. Settle down.
Okay, do you want more car? Okay, and you want applesauce? Okay. All right, take another bite. One more. There you go.
Nice, that was a good bite too, buddy.
There you go.
Good bite.
should have warned him before I took it away.
We get reminded all the time. It just works so well.
It does. It really does.
Forget to do it. Okay, 10 more seconds and bye-bye car, okay?
Okay,
Bye-bye car. 10 okay. Okay, let me have it. Bye-bye car.
Oh,
no, that's okay. Settle down.
thank you.
Take two bites, please. Do you want the car?
Yes.
Two bites. 2 bites. Good talking.
1, and then 2.
Good job. Good job, buddy.
Good job.
Good job. Good job.
How has mealtime been going with you? Still the same? Still
Yeah, it's
pretty?
going well. Yeah. You know what he had last night? Did Cheryl tell you?
No.
We are documenting this because this bite of spaghetti that he's about to take is the first ever meal that Jack Riley has had exactly what Mommy and Daddy are having. With the exception of the cottage cheese. He would eat that too, but we're going slow. I realize it's just spaghetti, and lots of kids probably eat spaghetti, but our kid never did. Not for us, anyway. And now, he's like just a regular kid having dinner with Mom and Dad.
Good boy. Say choo-choo. Choo-choo. Say here we go. Here you go. All right, make it go down. Go down. Whee! Yay! Good job. Should we build more tracks? A boat track. Okay, sure. Here you go. Do you want the green one or the blue one? Green. What trees? You want which one? Black. You want black? Oh, well, none of the ones I offered you. Cool. I like that. I like it. And he's definitely requesting more eating and drinking, which is really good to hear. So I don't know if they want to introduce him to other things. Like, it's up to them. But just the fact that he's requesting to drink is a big deal for him. Hey, Jack, 1 more minute, okay? Say, okay. 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 He has an issue sometimes, like inflexibility a little bit, with just the trains in particular. When I'll ask him to come over to do a program real quick, he'll want to clean up the trains up every single time. With the other toys though, like I can call him over, he can take a break, he's totally fine, and then after we're done with that program, he'll go back and he'll play. With the trains in particular, I don't know why he wants to clean them up every single time. So I'll run some programs and we'll see if he has that issue still. Hey, Jack. Good looking. Come here. Yeah! That's such good listening. Good job, mister. What is this? What are those? No, what are these? What's this? What's this one? Yay! There you go. Ears. Very good, kiddo. Hey, look at me. Hey, look over. Yay! There you go. What are these? Fingers. Good job. What are... Mouth, yeah. What's this? Head. Head. Very good. Okay, 1 more sticker. What are these? Fingers. Good job. All right. Yeah, that transition was a lot better. Where's Piglet?
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. I'm Nancy Allspaw Jackson.
And I'm Shannon Penrod.
My buddy.
I'm so thrilled when you're here. Wednesday's just so exciting. I get to spend an hour with Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, and then I get to spend an hour with you. How could it possibly be better?
And we can never stop talking. When we're in between breaks, Shannon and I are like, nyam, 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 nyam.
And Emily's saying to us, all right, ladies, are you listening to me, ladies?
10 seconds.
No, we're not listening.
So I just had a very emotional moment down in the parking garage here.
Yeah.
the A-word segments that you see.
Yes.
Long story short, the mom, Cheryl, works with one of my dearest friends, Kim Harbin, who's head of publicity at Buena Vista. And Cheryl was given my name through Kim when Jack Riley was first diagnosed at a very young age, at about 1.5 years.
Yeah.
And she emailed me. I said, call me right away. I'm going to save you literally 10 years of heartache. And so she called me, and, you know, she would be the first to admit there was a lot of denial going on. Well, I don't really know if he's autistic because he's really sweet. And, you know, he doesn't have the tantrums, and he doesn't. But as I asked her about things, it was clear that he was firmly, you know, on the scale. And so I said, the first thing you're going to do is you're going to get him an intensive ABA program. And when I told her 30 to 40 hours, she was like, what? I'm like, I know. Then I said, and the second thing you're going to do is you're going to go on the diet. And the third thing you're going to do is you're going to get a support group like Taka. And she's like, I'm so overwhelmed. But you know what? She went out and did all of those things. And I just met that child.
For the first time.
And you would never know. And the dad hugged me and said, thank you for saving our lives.
Isn't that a wonderful thing?
It's, I think, why we do this, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
It's why we're here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And what an amazing thing, not only that you did that for that family, but so many of us are getting to learn from their experience because they were willing to have it videotaped.
Which is wonderful.
It is wonderful.
Yeah, and I'm going to have them on the show, as you said.
Absolutely.
Yeah, the dad seems really cool.
Oh, yeah, I talk all the time. I'm a huge fan of the A-word, and I'm a huge fan of that dad because he is willing to, on camera, not get it right.
Right.
And to talk about how it feels.
Oh, it's hard for the dads.
You know, I love both the parents, but I really relate to the dad.
So
the mom's very Buddha-like, and you know, I'm sure she gets frustrated, you know, and she talks about her emotions sometimes, but the dad, I really relate to.
Yeah, well, he's doing a real service to other fathers out there.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But thank you for stepping up to the plate and making sure that they got the phone call.
Well, I try to do that with families. Sometimes I know the families that are going to really jump in.
Yeah.
And sometimes I have to, with some of the families, I have to let go because if I see that they just can't take it on, and I tell them, you know, if you take this on now, you're literally saving your child's life and your life because what could be maybe a 3 to 5 year process, you know, takes the place of being a lifetime process that so many of us are going to have with our kids. So.
Absolutely.
So anyway, that was great. And then we were talking just a minute ago about the fact that the little boy in Alabama, praise the Lord, has been found and safe and gotten out of the bunker.
Absolutely. And you know, we've all been hearing the story and heard the story about, of course, there's not a lot of information about how they got him actually out of the bunker because they can't tell. It's secret techniques that they do.
Yeah.
But we especially wanted to talk about it today because it is his 6th birthday today.
Yes.
And I just wanted to celebrate that and to say to him and to his family, congratulations and happy birthday. And what a wonderful thing. We were talking about it during the week here, and all of us kept that family in our prayers.
Yes.
So sorry about the bus driver, but how heroic that he was willing to put himself between that gunman and the other children, and how thrilling that we've had a good outcome, that this child is safe and having his 6th birthday.
I did notice that some of the initial reports said autistic boy, then it was defined as he has ADHD, I believe.
And we heard Asperger's as well.
Asperger's.
But there was ADHD as well.
Yeah,
they were saying Asperger's and ADHD, and I know I was devastated when I heard that there was a child who had been taken captive. That was so upsetting to me. And then when I heard Asperger's and ADHD,
because you know these special needs. I mean, how terrifying for a child that can't maybe communicate in the same way or understand you know what's going on, and you know hopefully, and I'm sure he will have a lot of therapy to help him through this.
The grandmother has been quoted as saying that he is physically okay. It's going to be a long time before they know where he is mentally, and that it might be the rest of his life getting over what happened. But so thrilling that he's alive and well and at home. So grateful for that. And we also have a story about, you know, sometimes when bad things happen, the choices that people make really define not only how they're going to deal the rest of their life, but define how the rest of us cope with it. And of course, when the Newtown shooting happened, it really made a lot of us have to rethink what we were doing in our everyday lives. And one of the families that lost their child who was on the autism spectrum and had an aide, they've turned this around now at this point, and they are taking this tragedy in their lives and trying to do something to benefit a lot of other people. And I just find that really remarkable, especially when you consider how little time has passed.
I think that's amazing, and I also think that you know, because there was so much initially about Adam Lanza having Asperger's, and now I notice there's been a complete drawback from that, that there's not been a discussion on it because of the fact that we don't really know if he had that diagnosis. And as I said to one interviewer, you know, the chances of a kid with Asperger discovering the cure for cancer are just as likely as the chances of a kid with Asperger's killing somebody. I mean, there's absolutely no connection.
There is no connection.
So the fact that this family had this compassion, and do we know how they're raising the money, Shannon?
We absolutely do, and we should say, first of all, that it's Josephine Gay. She was 7 years old, a student at Sandy Hook Elementary. She was one of the 20 victims that was shot and killed on December 14th. And
died in the arms of her behavior therapist.
Yes. And can I also say that the family of that behavior therapist has asked for people to make donations. They chose for people to make donations to Autism Speaks, but this family, they are asking
Doug Flutie.
They're asking for people to donate to the Doug Flutie
we
Foundation.
love the Doug Flutie Foundation.
Absolutely.
Act Today does a lot of work with them. We actually received a grant from Doug Flutie, and we also, for our Act Today for Military Families, and we also partnered with them and with Hollyrod for a VH1 bowling event. And I have to say, they are one of the finest autism organizations out there.
Absolutely, really amazing organization. So I just think that Josephine's parents, it's Michelle and Bob Gay, the fact that they have so quickly been able to say we want something positive to come out of this is really amazing. They had worked really hard to provide therapy for their child, and so now they want to make it a little bit easier for somebody else down the line. And if that moves you and you want to add to
Two
the fund,
families have set up funds, it says.
Yeah, there's another family, of 6-year-old Dylan Hockley has also, but I'm not sure which organization they are, but I do know that the family of the behaviorist is asking for donations to Autism Speaks.
Okay.
So really amazing to turn that around.
Great.
And of course, we have some exciting news about somebody that we've had on the show before, Vena Tiero.
Yes, Tiero.
I frequently say her name wrong. Apologies to Vena.
We went to a screening of her film, My Autism Boys.
My Tiero Boys.
My Tiero Boys.
There we are.
Yes.
And amazing film. Gut-wrenching, yes.
Gut-wrenching to see how this single mom who literally on welfare and extremely limited means made it her life's mission to do everything she can for these two young men with autism.
And on top of that, to document it, because we all know how difficult that is.
Yeah, with just a little mini-cam, you know, and she made this brilliant film.
Yeah, very emotional, very honest, and we had the benefit of being able to see it in a screening, and it's getting another screening coming up on Monday at the Pan-African Film Festival. It is their 21st anniversary, and they have some amazing films that are being screened there, and My Tiero Boys is one of them.
Great.
We want to do a shout out.
And that's in LA?
It's in LA.
Okay.
And we want to do a shout out to Vena and to anyone who is in the LA area who would like to see that film, because we talked about it a lot. It was probably, 6-8 months ago that we talked about it. And you can Google search Pan-African Film Festival. We'll try to put a link up to it on our Facebook as well. But some really amazing films that they're going to be screening, and hers is one of them.
Okay, great.
So fabulous that autism will be represented in that in such a wonderful, wonderful way.
Right. Now, I'm very excited because when we come back, we have a friend of mine who does amazing work in the field of autism. She's also an autism warrior mom and also an autism military wife. So she has a lot to talk about. She's done a lot of advocacy, and we're going to talk to her about some of those recent studies last week about the case with the Vaccine Injury Court, which I'm really curious was not more widely reported in the mainstream media.
Yeah.
And then there was, of course, a study that came out from a group saying that the vaccine schedule was safe. Now, Becky really knows, Becky Estepp, who is our guest, really knows this area. So we're going to have a very interesting conversation about her journey being an autism mom and also the work she's doing with the Elizabeth Burt Center.
Really excited to meet her. I've never met her before,
Well, you'll
so
love
very
her.
excited.
Okay.
All right, we'll be back after these messages. Stick with us.
Hi everyone, welcome back. For the month of February, I thought it'd be a great idea to work on an activity that would help your kiddos identify and label emotions. And to help me out today is my good friend, Jamie.
Hey, Suzanne.
Hey there, Jamie.
Hey, how can I help?
Well, the way you can help me out is that because you're a sock puppet, you can do things with your face that I cannot do.
No way.
Totally. The way you can do it is that, you know, you have interchangeable features, which means you can make super exaggerated faces, which makes it easier for kiddos to identify them and to label them.
Uh-huh.
Hey, I have a favor to ask you.
Yeah?
Can you help us out and show us some of your faces you can make?
Of course. Here we go.
Ooh, you look super mad.
I was super mad.
Can you show us another one?
Sure.
Ooh, you look super sad.
I was super sad.
All right, can you show us one more?
One more.
All right. You look super excited.
I was super excited.
I am too. You know why? Because I really want to show everyone how to make a little buddy like you. So let's get started. The materials you'll be needing are googly eyes, felt, a hot glue gun, imagination, scissors, Velcro, some heavy cardstock, and a clean sock. All right, let's get to it. So the first thing you want to do is you're going to grab your sock. Hopefully it's not dirty and used. It's a clean one. And what you're going to do is that you're going to take your sock, fold it in half like so, and then you're going to take your scissors and cut down. The reason we're doing this is that we're going to make an area for the mouth. The next thing you want to do is you want to trim the inside a little bit, because if you don't, it's going to have an overbite. So I'm just going to take my scissors and just trim a little bit off, not much. Now that this guy is ready, I'm going to take a hard cardstock or note card or whatever you have that's a piece of paper. I'm going to fold it in half. And what I'm going to do with this is going to be the inside of its mouth, the kind of reinforcement so you're able to move its mouth around. So I'm going to just cut it into an oval. And don't worry, if it's a little too big, you can always trim it. With this sock puppet project, the materials we'll be using, like the hot glue, is not something for children. So this is something you're going to be doing by yourself and then asking your child to join in once the puppet is ready to go. All right, now that I got that out of the way, let's start gluing. I'm going to take my hot glue gun and I'm going to glue it on the paper. Okay, once I have that, I'm going to put that in the inside of its mouth, and then I'm going to take the sock and then pull it over the edge and cover it the glue. All right, so now that I have the bottom part done, I'm going to do the same thing to the top. So now that we have this part assembled, what we're going to do is we're going to take a piece of felt and we're going to cover this area so you don't see all the scraggly stuff. So I have my piece of felt right here. I'm going to fold it in half and I'm just going to cut out a similar oval shape. And again, don't worry if it's too big. You can always trim it after we glue it on. I'm going to glue it inside. All right, now we got pretty much the base of the sock puppet. He's got a moving mouth, but wait, he's got no features. We gotta help him out with that. So what I'm gonna do is I have these pieces of Velcro that I bought that are already sticky on the back, which makes my life a lot easier. And I'm gonna peel this off and place it where I want his eyes. So one there and one there. And then I'm also gonna put them also along his mouth. And then if you want to get fancy, you can put some for his eyebrows as well. So now that I have this, we should be making some features for him. I'm alive! Alive! I had a great time with my buddy Jamie, and I hope you did too. Until next time, bye!
Bye! And don't forget to send us your photos at facebook.com/autismlive.
Can you see me? Can you see me flying by your side?
We're back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and we have a special guest here today, Becky Estepp. Rebecca Estepp.
Either one.
And either one, okay. And Becky, you and I have known each other for some time with your work in the autism field, and currently you are the spokeswoman for, or Director of Communications.
Director of Communications.
For the Elizabeth Burt
Center for Autism Law and Advocacy, which we go by the acronym EBCALA, because that's a little easier to say. But we're named after Elizabeth Burt, who was one of the first warrior moms, one of the first. She was a brilliant attorney out of Chicago, who was one of the moms that noticed something after the vaccination of her son, and tragically she was killed in a car accident in 2006. And there are many attorneys in our community. They came together and wanted to put together a law center for our kids with her, you know, in honor of her. And I've been blessed to be a part of this amazing organization. You know, I think there are so many amazing autism organizations, but I really feel EBCALA is special because they noticed that the legal needs of our kids, there's no one really addressing that. And so we address special education law, family law with like custody issues. Health insurance is a huge one, you know, trying to get your providers or your health insurance providers to pay for therapies. Right. There is so much information at ebcala.org on the different legal needs, and unfortunately, as these kids are getting older, we're having criminal issues as well because of the social. They're not understanding socially what is acceptable and what is not. So we even can help people with criminal issues, and unfortunately we get probably once a month, you know, somebody incarcerated that shouldn't be.
You know, I'm so glad to hear exactly what the mission of the organization is, because I've actually had calls at ACT today on issues like this.
Right.
And now I know where to refer people to.
Right. You know, we're a growing organization. We're always trying to fundraise like anybody else so that we can, you know, right now, you know, it's like on a wing and a prayer, but we are trying to grow it. We can refer, you know, point people in the right direction, and many times it's been a really critical lifeline. And we also are working a lot on vaccine exemptions. As you know, in the state of California now, it's getting harder to get an exemption after they passed the AB 2109 law, and that is just going to keep happening all over the country. So we have very talented attorneys working on exemptions, and also looking at the vaccine injury compensation program and if it's, you know, fair to families.
Let's talk about exemptions for just a second, because I think there are a lot of families out there who don't know what an exemption is and don't know that it's a possibility for them. So explain it for us.
Well, 48 out of 50 states have exemptions. Mississippi and West Virginia, you do not have exemptions.
So vaccines are mandatory where there is no exemption.
Right. It is, you can exempt for different reasons, either philosophical, medical, or religious, in 48 out of 50 states. So, but in California, we just passed a law, and I don't know if it's passed, but I don't know if it's enforced yet, that if you want an exemption for your child, for your vaccines, you are going to need to be counseled by a pediatrician. They will have to sign off that they have counseled you, and then you can sign the exemption. And that, I think, is an unnecessary obstacle, in my opinion. I worry about families who might be economically depressed, because that's going to be another you know, office call, another doctor visit, another copay. And, you know, and what about these busy working parents? You know, they might think, well, you know, forget it. I
Right.
don't need to do
I'll
that.
just go ahead and.
When this should be your, it's an exemption. The state shouldn't be putting themselves, your doctor, in between your parental rights.
And plus, you don't know how well educated that doctor is on some of these issues.
Right, and then also I worry about a doctor who might be signing, the exemptions, and yet his patients might be still getting the exemption. Is the state going to come down on doctors that are like letting their patients exempt? It's very scary, the tracking and that sort of thing. So we got to keep our eye on it.
And I kind of want to backtrack just a little bit and have you tell our viewers about you and how you came to the field of autism, how this is personal to you.
It's very personal. My son just turned 15 last month, actually just about a week ago. He developed autism after a very clear vaccine reaction in 1998.
And how old was he at the time?
He was 9 months old, and within 3 hours, screaming, fever, throwing his head back. That's a clear indicator that he had an encephalopathy, brain swelling. But at the time, I was a brand new mom of just 9 months old.
You didn't know.
I did not know. I called my pediatrician and said, I can't believe it. We were just there 3 hours ago, and now, he's doing this. And they said, oh, sweetie, he has a rotavirus. He just picked up something here. And I was thinking, wow, in college, in biology, I learned that like 24 to 36 hours to become symptomatic. But when you have this voice of authority,
of course,
telling you, they're like, he'll be okay. And that day, I always say he didn't turn autistic that day. It's like his health was ruined. His immune system was compromised, and it just became this like 18-month period of mystery fevers and different viruses. Like he picked up hand, foot, and mouth disease worse than anybody. Yeah. And the doctors are like, I've never seen this, and it was crazy. And then at age 2, he was diagnosed with autism.
So you saw him regress over the course of that year.
Yeah.
But there were many health issues, and were there a lot of GI issues, gastrointestinal?
Unbelievable GI issues. Okay. Unbelievable. He was one of the first kids to be scoped by Dr. Kriegsman, and
Arthur Kriegsman, who is at where does he practice? Down
he practices still in Austin, but he's mostly out of Woodbury, New York. So at the time, we had to fly to New York, and it was quite the scene because my husband was deployed with no notice. He was deployed, and so I had to take both of my kids were scoped, two kids on laxatives on JetBlue across the country.
Well, we talk all the time about our Act a Day for Military Families campaign, which you've come and run in our race down in San Diego with your family and supported. So she's not only just an example of an autism mom and an autism advocate, but she's military as well. So those special challenges, and those challenges were in your life, which made it difficult.
They were. My husband's a reservist, so we kind of have a different situation where, half of the time we're in the civilian world and half of the time we're in the military world, especially since 9/11. We really didn't see that he'd be deployed 4 times, but actually he's about to get deployed again. So 5 deployments in 10 years was something I was not anticipating. No. And my heart goes out to all the military families because the way that they have to move around. Fortunately, we haven't had to move around, but we also have had special challenges of when he goes on active duty, all of our benefits change. So we have to go back.
To transition to TRICARE?
We transition to TRICARE. Okay. We get into EFMP. We start accessing those things, but in between is just this bureaucratic maze.
I can't even imagine.
That, God bless that we do have these wonderful therapies paid for by TRICARE, and I'm hoping they'll even do more like they should. And Karen Driscoll is a saint, and I love her very much. But we're right now in the in-between of trying to get back into the programs to get everything set up, and it takes months to do so.
So you've had all these challenges. You saw that in your son's case there was clearly a correlation with a vaccine injury. That kind of then mobilized you in terms of getting involved. And then tell us what happened from there.
Well, what happened was a lot of people were on a Yahoo group, you know, because we're going back 12 years, 13 years, oh my goodness. So, you know, there was the internet, but it was really to use email. So this Yahoo group, you know, GFCF Kids, was like my lifeline. And that was when Lisa Ackerman was starting to put TACA together. I live in San Diego. Lisa was in Huntington Beach. I had a newborn. I couldn't imagine, you know, getting in a minivan with 9 moms in San Diego, breastfeeding, going up to, you know, up to Huntington Beach. And I said, look, there's 9 of us. Why don't we do what Lisa's doing and just make it like the Lisa meeting down here? And they're like, well, yeah, why don't we do that? And so, you know,
a chapter was born.
A chapter was born. So that was 2001, and I've been leading that chapter. Well, in 2001 it was my idea, but I felt like I was brand new. I wouldn't dare tell anybody anything because, you know, so there were some great moms at that time that were doing it, and then I took over in 2003. And
for TACA. Talk about curing autism. I just want to be clear what org where. And Lisa has been, you did a whole week on TACA, didn't you?
Yes,
covering?
And Lisa has been wonderful. She does our cooking segment, What's Left, and we've had several TACA moms. One who is in our control room right now. I was talking about her yesterday. Moira Giamateo. She's the one that I was saying yesterday. Says somebody has to be the project manager for autism. We love Moira.
I adore Moira. She was one of my first people I ever met, and then she did the same thing. She's like, well, if Becky's doing it in San Diego, I should do it in the Valley, and that's just.
And I benefited from that.
You benefited well, that's what I felt like. It was the Underground Railroad.
You know? And get our children out.
Laura Marquin, who is our Director of Programs and Development, got in early down in Orange County with Lisa, and she was, as she says, one of those blessed families that Justin got in it too, and is recovered and actually in a gifted class. So you know, this just goes back, and I want to say this to all of our viewers, that support group, I did not get TACA when Wyatt was diagnosed. I wish I had gone to them, but then within a short amount of time was involved professionally with TACA. And I just feel like that program is so important to get the knowledge, to learn about all of the resources that are there for you, so you don't have to navigate just cold, you know, going in cold. To get, there's nothing better than another mom to tell you about the school district, the regional center, and biomedical treatments if you're interested. You know, if you're interested in the diet, if you're interested in any other of the treatments that can detoxify and boost the immune system, because for each child is individual, and each child will have a different response to a different treatment. So from talking to other mothers and joining a support group, joining a TACA group, you're going to gain so much, don't you think?
I think so.
Absolutely. Because when you're starting on this journey, you don't have much time as it is, and you certainly don't have time to reinvent the wheel.
No. And you're reading things on the internet, and you go, well, I don't know about this, because I don't know about this for this. And then a mom will tell you, oh, well, you know, that kind of GI issue, you got to have probiotics, and you got to have this, and you got to have that.
TACA has a journey guide, and when I hand them out to new parents, I said, this is what took me 7 years. I hope it takes you 7 weeks.
Yes. And we give that journey guide to every...
On the floor here. I have it.
Here it is.
Oh, I got it upside down.
And we give that journey guide to every Act Today family that applies for a grant. They get this, and we get the military family guide to the ATMF families.
I want to point out, this is volume 2 for the more maturing child, but there is a volume 1 for if you have the little ones. So if you're thinking, oh, it's just for the young kids, no.
Okay, that's the volume 2. Okay, great. So then let's go back, and then when did you start working with Elizabeth Burt Center?
Well, I started working in 2011 for a really important project called Unanswered Questions. many board members at the Elizabeth Burt Center for Autism Law and Advocacy worked on, it was like an investigation. A few years ago, a wonderful investigative reporter named Cheryl Atkinson looked at the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program and found that 1,322 individuals had been compensated for brain injury. And you know, the vaccine court has always denied that there's any connection with autism and vaccine damage. But you know, Cheryl found that there was brain injury, and that just sent up her radar, like, well, what would that look like? And this fabulous dad named Lou Conti, he is an investigator for the state of New York, the probation department. He, because he's an investigator, started looking up all these people, the 1,322, and started calling them to see, to ask them, does your child have autism? And what he only found, or the team only found 170 of the 1,322, because if your child's name is Joe Smith from Los Angeles, no way. But if you're Kimberly Sue Latour from Centerville, Tennessee, you can find her. So Lou started calling these people, and what he found was a lot of them were older, like 30. They're all, autism? You know, the parents like, autism? No, I don't think so. And he can hear the individual in back going, ah, you know, and he's like, is that your child? Oh, yes. Well, what is he doing? Well, he's, you know, with his race cars. And he's like, oh, could I send you something? And he would send them one of the questionnaires that the vaccine court used to see if a child was on the spectrum. And so he found people that were on the spectrum, and he also sent the questionnaire, and so 83 out of the 172 fit the diagnosis of autism. So that just raised a red flag. What the vaccine court said, well, they were compensated for encephalopathy and seizures. They were not compensated for autism. But we were like, but yet they have it. And of course they'll say, well, they have the symptoms of autism. But then of course,
well, autism is diagnosed by symptoms.
Exactly, and you're playing this ridiculous semantics game. And then that, you know, and that leads us to like the Hannah Polling decision.
Which the Hannah Polling decision, can you just review that for us briefly?
Hannah Polling was compensated, and she's important because she was in the omnibus autism proceeding, which meant she was one of the 5,000 kids that were in a special program within the Vaccine Injury Compensation Program that was especially for children on the spectrum. My son was one of these kids, and when we filed in 2002, we thought, oh, isn't this wonderful? The government is, you know, created a special program, especially for these kids to look at this. Well, we found out that it really wasn't, and after 10 years, his case was dismissed about a year ago. But Hannah Polling was, and God bless the Pollings, I think they're wonderful people. She had a special situation. Her father was a neurologist. Her mother was a nurse and an attorney. So when I was explaining to you where Eric was screaming, throwing his head back, I didn't know what that was. Hannah Polling's father, John, knew what that was. Got her to the hospital, got all of the tests that you would need, and conclusively showed neurological damage. Hannah was supposed to be a test case, as Eric actually was supposed to be a test case, but we got kicked out because of a statute of limitations issue. And her case was going to be a test case. They had to compensate her because they couldn't let her be a test case because she would have won. And anybody that would have looked like Hannah Polling, had the same symptoms, the same onset of those 5,000 kids, could have won their case too. So they quietly compensated, and no one was ever supposed to know, but documents got leaked to the media, and we had our first child in the OAP, in the Omnibus program, that was compensated. There was another one, Bailey Banks, who was compensated. And the thing is, the court's response to Hannah Poling was, she's 1 in a million. You know, she just happens to be one of the 5,000, but she's 1 in a million. She had a vaccine injury, and she also happens to have autism. And then they used really weird wording, like the vaccines didn't cause her autism, but it resulted in her autism.
Okay.
And that's
really splitting hairs.
That is ridiculous.
Well, I think we're going to take a break, but I want to come back to this just recent case.
That tees it up perfectly.
Yes, the two different.
And then the Institute of Medicine report on vaccine safety.
Sure.
Okay, so we'll take a break and we'll be right back with Becky Estepp and more on autism and her journey as an activist.
Thank you. There's been another new study about optimal outcomes, and I wanted to know, what are your thoughts on recovery? Do you think it's possible? Do you believe in recovery from autism?
On recovery, you learn how to adapt. I mean, I've had a lot of experimental brain scans done, and I have found things that are definitely abnormal. I have an enlarged left ventricle that's definitely abnormal. That's not going to go away. That scan was done less than 5 years ago. But you work with someone and they adapt. You're not going to make me an algebra specialist. That's just not going to happen. But things like getting better at public speaking, that is something that I gradually learned. What I'm seeing today, especially with some of the kids on the mild end of the spectrum, I'm seeing teenagers that are much milder than me that haven't learned things like how to go up to the counter at McDonald's and order food all by themselves, how to go on the bus, how to shop, how to go in the store and shop, how to do a checkbook, basic things like that. Because what drives me crazy is when I go back to the cattle world and I see a guy in the maintenance shop that's running the whole maintenance shop at a big plant, and he's as Asperger as he can be, and he's running a whole maintenance shop. And then I see Junior that's addicted to video games, and you can't get his duff off his chair and get him doing things. Now, when I was in high school, I did a lot of thinking about this. I got kicked out of a large girls' school for throwing a book, and I went to a special boarding school up on a farm, and I was allowed to work with the farm animals. And they let me goof off and not study. But I got to thinking, there's one thing they did not let me do. I goofed off and I didn't study, but I had to physically go to class. When I didn't want to go to the Friday night movie, they made me the projectionist. One thing they were not going to let me do is sit in my room, become a recluse in my room. They were not going to allow that.
I want to know why you threw the book. Why did you throw it?
Oh, I threw a book at a girl because she called me a retard.
Oh, good reason.
Oh, no,
to throw
she
it at.
teased me. And I had some problems getting in fights when kids teased me. But it was always brought about by someone picking on me. And the principal had me kicked out of school, out of a large girls' school for doing that.
And what'd your mom say?
Well, she was not very happy about the whole thing, because when the principal called, I answered the phone and he said I was incorrigible and I was kicked out of school. Mother was really angry that he just said that right directly to me, which was definitely not very appropriate.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. Our very special guest in the studio right now is Becky Estepp, and she is a fierce autism warrior mom and also an autism advocate. And we've been talking a little bit about vaccines, and I think it's really important out the gate to acknowledge that this is a really emotional subject. On all sides of the argument, it's an emotional subject, and none of us here are advocating that you do or don't do anything in terms of vaccines, but I think we would all agree that it's important to be educated and to act according to your education and wishes. And we've been talking with Becky about her circumstance with her child.
That's true. I mean, I meant to say this earlier, is that I don't think vaccination injury is the only way that children develop autism. It's just, that's what happened in my house.
In your case, and you stand by it, that's what happened with your child.
I always say no parent would ever lie about what happened to their child.
Absolutely.
I believe anybody that said, my child was different from the beginning, and then I want to hear their story.
Yeah.
And then I need them to do the same thing for me.
Absolutely.
You know, like, this is what happened in mine, because there's one thing I know, we all love our children, and they all got to where they are in some place. It just happens to be that I've heard my story probably thousands of times now, and I'm not exaggerating.
And we also know that environmental triggers are now, there are studies that are showing that the environment is definitely a factor in autism, and to a much greater degree. Even the most conservative autism organizations are going on record as saying they now believe that it certainly is not just genetics, that there's environment, epigenetic is the term.
Right, and it's, there was that really important study from Stanford that came out in, I remember it was July 4th, I believe it was 2 years ago, that showed that they were absolutely wrong. It's more like 80% of cases are due to the environment, and they had it exactly wrong. You know, they said, well, maybe it's, you know, just a little bit. You know, but they were absolutely wrong.
So tell us about this recent vaccine injury compensation case. There were millions of dollars awarded to 2 children.
Oh, yeah.
And was that considered autism-induced a vaccine injury?
Well, what happened with these 2 new cases, again, they're saying, well, they're being compensated for like encephalopathy, for seizures. And oh yes, they happen to be kids that are in the omnibus and they happen to have autism. Again, we're getting into semantics and splitting hairs. When we met Hannah Pulling in 2009, she was the pink unicorn, you know, that she was so rare. But now we have 4 out of the 5,000. So it's not as rare. And is this a pattern? And why are these cases, the 5,000 cases, being you know, just brushed away and being sent away from the program as fast as possible? I think there's going to be a lot more, there needs to be a lot more investigation, and I think the vaccine injury compensation program has a lot of problems.
All right. Let's talk about then the study just released by the Institute of Medicine.
Yes.
Which is out of, where is that body out of? You're familiar with this.
The Institute of Medicine is actually an independent organization, but they are in Washington, D.C.
Right.
And this study that was just released a couple weeks ago frustrated me.
Okay.
In April of 2007, a lot of parent advocates were in Virginia, and we got a meeting with the Institute of Medicine, and it was Autism and the Environment, and it actually, a big guidebook came out of it, and it was a really important meeting. And basically out of that meeting, what the parent advocates asked for was for the vaccinated versus unvaccinated study. That's what they wanted to get down to the bottom of brass tacks. That's the gold standard. You know, you compare one group that is subjected to something to a group that isn't, and look at their health outcomes. So that's what was asked. And then we had to wait 6 years, and we get this science literature review. And what they did was they went and looked at all the studies that they had done before that said the vaccine schedule is safe, and they reviewed all those and came up with the conclusion that the vaccine schedule is safe. And I was quoted in the paper by saying this gets down to nothing, because what we asked for was vaccinated versus unvaccinated. They addressed that. They said we will not do, or we can't do the study, but really what they're saying is we won't do the study. They said they wouldn't do the study because they thought it would be unethical, you know, to not give babies vaccines. And of course, that's not what we're asking for. There's homeschool populations. There are religious populations.
Many children that have been vaccinated that could be used.
That could be used, and they refuse to do it. So they won't do it. And until that study is done, you know, I think this war is going to go back and forth.
Yeah. So what is that the most important thing you think for the future that needs to be done to kind of get this issue?
You know, there's just 2 things. You know, we have to find the causation so we can prevent it. You know, I worry about my grandchildren. My son's now 15. I have a 13-year-old. You know, if we don't get down to the bottom of this in the next decade or so, I'm going to have a whole new generation that I'm going to have to worry about. So I want this prevented. And then I'm so worried about our kids, our 15-year-olds, our 16, 17-year-olds. They're about to age out. And so we need better services for these kids. We need, we need employment, we need housing, we need so much. There's so much potential that they have. I want them to have the best life possible. If there are these kids that are injured that may not, you know, my son, your sons have done so much more than we thought they would, and every day's a blessing. But, you know, we're looking to a point that they may not reach a potential that I thought my son would.
Sure.
And I need a good place for him, you know?
We all, yes,
Yeah.
this is something we're very concerned about this issue. Right. So you think those are the biggest issues
I do.
in terms of us for the future?
I do.
Yeah. All right. Well, we really appreciate your viewpoint on this, Becky. This is a lot of food for thought, and I think there's certainly a lot of research on this. Does the Elizabeth Burt Center have a website that you can go and read about this?
Yes. Please go to EBCALA.
EBCALA. Okay.
B as in boy, C as in cat, ALA.org. Wonderful, wonderful website, fantastic organization. We love fundraising. We need more funds to help families.
Right.
I hope everybody can go check them out.
And once again, we are not making the statement that vaccines cause autism. We're asking all parents to take a look at this issue, educate yourself, and don't necessarily trust a pediatrician that says, oh, it's okay, vaccinate your child today, it's all right, the schedule's great. You need to make that decision for yourself. Is
Absolutely.
that?
Be informed.
Absolutely. Be informed.
Wonderful.
Okay.
Thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you for coming and keep up the great work. You're an inspiration.
We're going to take a short break and come back to finish out the show. Stick with us.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, you know, where is he, what is he doing, is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but you know, we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What
yeah.
did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and they informed me that he had received the grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, you know, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle. Without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, Act Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta, and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get 2 kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear Act Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. You know, we underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community. So we're back with Let's Talk Autism. And Shannon, after Becky left, you and I were sitting here talking about what a complex issue this vaccination.
Absolutely. And one of the things I was saying is, and I want to be really clear for everybody watching, because it's so complex and people have very definitive opinions about this issue. And I always like to say, I don't want anybody to tell me what I should think. And I don't want you to think that we're telling you what to think in any way, fashion. But I do think it's important to present information.
I do too. And for all parents to be educated on this, form your own opinion, and don't be force-fed something by your doctor or by necessarily what you're
And we're
doing.
not trying to force-feed you anything either, so let's be clear about that. And I wanted to take a minute here at the end. We keep saying we're going to talk about SOS for Act Today.
Act SOS. We have a program, Act SOS. Now, we have to say to everyone that the applicant must have immediate need for treatment support, and if the treatment is not found, the applicant's physical safety is in jeopardy.
So it's
this
really
is a child
urgent.
that's running to the street because they don't have the fence, or this is a child that needs a safety bed. So we need funding for this. So go on our website.
Raise some money for that. Okay, we'll be back next week. Some really exciting shows. Until then, please give your kiddos a hug from me.
And me, and make it a great day.
Bye-bye.